All right. Not here too early. I'm just there's somebody. Hey, how's it going, Ace?
Sorry, I had myself on mute there.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
good. Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Very good.
Yeah, your spring break?
Yeah, I was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, my kids were on spring break for school, and so I got to see them a little bit that day, so
Mm-hmm.
it was nice.
Yeah.
Very good. See, we'll see. I don't know if anybody else is going to jump in. Hopefully they will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've had my computer plugged in all day, but it says my battery is at 12%. So somehow it's not registering as plugged in. I don't know. It says plugged in, but hope we'll make it through.
Okay.
Not, I'll be joining in as a student probably on the other link. So
Uh, maybe it's the battery just not charging,
yeah, it
perhaps.
might be. Yeah. Hopefully
Yeah.
it'll just stay on. So even if the
Mm.
battery doesn't charge, it's fine. I used it plugged in most of the time anyway.
Yeah. I use mine too. I think it's one of the causes why the battery doesn't function anymore, they say, if you are plugged in, but
Yeah.
you're not actually consuming battery,
Oh,
the
okay.
battery. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it happened to me before. I just ordered a new battery through Amazon,
Oh,
you
okay.
know. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I have on here just kind of a recap of what we talked about last week, since it's been,
Mhm.
or last time, I guess, since it's been 2 weeks. So we talked about that the 5 levels of homelessness, government housing, substandard housing around those government projects, um, kind of the boarding house where you go and you probably boarding house for hotels is probably kind of a similar thing, at least here in the States. Hey, Risha. She's in, says connecting the audio. But it does make sense to you, Ace. Last
Yeah, yeah.
last time we talked about that. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with those things. That to me, even though they might have a home, it is kind of a form of homelessness, being that it's in a way incomplete. I see also a lot of those conditions here in the
Oh yeah.
Philippines. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're just recapping, Risha, just talk a little bit about what we covered last time right before spring break, because it's been a couple of weeks. So we talked about these 5 levels of homelessness. And so government housing, substandard housing around the government projects, boarding houses, those that conduct their affairs at night. There are a lot of people that do the things that they do at night so that they can find a place to stay, and then transients, that's the typical person that might be going from shelter to shelter, or that's just sleeping outside. So we also talked about how poverty is complex. There's a lot of different causes of it. I mean, we could blame a lot of different things, and we would probably be right. Just lack of adequate adequate affordable housing. That could be a poverty related issue. The Where a person is born or raised, poverty looks different here in Oklahoma or Texas than it does in the Philippines, right? And so so where a person is born, that does play a role. So there are a lot of different things that play a role in poverty, but one of the big things is that it's just a breakdown of relationships. Relationships with God, with self, with others, with the rest of creation. And so I think we looked at this picture last week on this comes from the book When Helping Hurts. And it kind of explains that a little more. We have this, we've got this broken relationship with God that's led some to deny God's existence, or at the very least deny some of his authority. It could give way to materialism, to the worshiping of false idols, false gods, false spirits, a poverty of being, meaning we can get our relationship with ourselves is broken because of our relationship with God being broken. So people get these God complexes, or they get low self-esteem, kind of two extremes there. But I think both are pride issues. So I know they might not necessarily look that way, but they could both be pride issues. So we get this God complex where it's like, I'm going to eradicate homelessness by building houses for everybody, or I'm going to eliminate poverty or hunger or whatever it is. We can get, if we're not careful, we can kind of get this God complex and in the process actually leave God out of it, or we could get a low self-esteem. But now we have a poverty with others. We've got broken relationship with others. That's a poverty of community. We can get this sense of self-centeredness, of looking out for ourselves only, and of using other people. And so that's not a place we want to be. And then the rest of creation kind of, we become where we aren't good stewards of our time. We aren't good stewards of the world around us. So these are, we talked about this last time. It's just a recap. And then we also talked about 3 types of charity: relief, rehabilitation, and development. And so relief is that immediate, we've got to take care of this issue now. We've got to provide the relief now. Rehabilitation is kind of getting back to the state of what it was, meaning, let's say, a person loses their house due to a fire or something like that. They've lost their house to a fire. They don't have any immediate resources. They didn't have insurance. There's an immediate need for relief. And so we're bringing in this relief. We're making sure that you have a place to stay. Rehabilitation would be, okay, we've got you back into a house. So you're back where you were, you have housing. And development is kind of going further to say, now listen, when you had your house before, you didn't have insurance and you lost everything, and it put you in a bind, and it caused this relief issue. So development is kind of working. What are some things that we can do? Well, I didn't have insurance because I couldn't afford it. What are some things that you had that maybe you could do without in order to make sure that you have the necessities that you need? So that's kind of those 3 types of charity. And development will go a lot deeper than that. That's just a very surface level explanation to it. It makes it easier to explain. So today, we're going to talk about relationships. So since we have this problem with relationships, let's talk about the importance of them. So remember, we talked about the incarnation a while back, but John 1:14 says, the word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Notice that he came to us. He adapted to our world. He took our form. He walked our streets. He didn't say, okay, you guys, you've all got to come to where I'm at. If you want help, you got to come to where I'm at. He took the initiative. Jesus takes the initiative. He takes on our emotions. He feels our pain, our hunger pains, our physical pains, all of these things to build a relationship. And just like we've come to find Jesus in our world, we must bring Jesus to the world of others. So we've got to be Jesus for other people. Any questions so far that you have? Okay. So we want to be Jesus to people, right? To the disenfranchised, to the marginalized. So there's a guy named Marvin Olasky. I hope I'm not butchering his name, but this is what he writes. This is his book. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's called The Tragedy of American Compassion, and it's talking about America's welfare system, basically, and what its original intent was, and what it has become. And so he has a chapter in there, I believe it's chapter 6, where he talks about 7 marks of effective charity. And he uses like this, the alphabet A, B, C, D, E, F, G. He goes through G. And let me see if I can find out so I can tell you. It's affiliation, bonding, categorization, discernment, employment, freedom, and God. And I know I said those kind of fast, but
Hello.
Hi, Emmanuel. How are you?
Hi. Not bad. What time? Oh, I thought I was 10 minutes late. So I guess.
Yeah, we started. I think Daniel dropped off, and he did mention he was having problems with his laptop. He said that if it disconnected, he would reconnect with another device. Okay. So yeah, we're just waiting on him.
Okay.
How are you over there?
Yeah, I'm good. It's getting warmer, so it's nice.
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah.
Were you able to find that book?
Yes, I did. I've bought the book. So I've started doing the first part of the homework, but the graph bit, I'm not sure what she meant by the graph. We have to draw a chart. I'm not sure what she meant by that, but hopefully I'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's just a simple exercise, yeah.
Okay, just, so is it
mm-hmm,
within the chapters? Is it kind of within the chapters?
Yeah, you'll come across it. I think it's a lost graph, the first one, and then another one, the second one is a relationship graph. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's written down in the book.
Okay, also. Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm. So I've read chapters 1 to 3, and there's 4, 5, 6 I need to read to do the second part of the homework. That's the first homework, yeah. So, and then I'll go on to the second part of the homework.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Looks like we got Daniel back. Hey, Daniel.
All right. Yeah, guys. My computer, I guess, went kaput. It's been plugged in all day, but it's a laptop, and it kept saying that the battery wasn't charging. So I apologize for that. That kind of took away our screen. So what I will do is I will email that to you, okay? Because and I really needed it today because there were some important things I wanted to talk about that would have really been aided because I wanted to show you a Word document. So trying to do a quick switch here, so I apologize for that. But let me bring up. I've got to go to a couple of documents here so that I can have my notes, because I had them up on the thing that my iPad, which I'm now using for the class. So just bear with me just a moment. I apologize for that. All right, so here we go. Good to see you all. I'm sorry you have to see my face on there full screen now. That's no fun for anybody, I know. All right, so Marvin Olosky writes in his book about affiliation. So those, and I'm trying to get my computer to stand up here so that I can have my hands free to tell you. Those 7 marks of effective charity are affiliation, bonding, categorization, discernment, employment, freedom, and God. And so each play an important role, but we're going to focus in today on affiliation. Affiliation is a person's natural relationships. So that's a person's family, friends, neighbors, church, community, extended family. That's one's affiliation. So it's the closest relationships, closest natural relationships that you should have. And so what he does here, whenever he talks about this, he says, many men a century ago were abandoning their families. Many young people were running away from home, and some of the elderly were out of contact with their children. Charity organizations responded by instructing their volunteers to work hard at restoring the family ties that had been sundered and strengthening church or social bond that was weakened. The prime goal of relief, all agreed at that time, was not material distribution, but rather affiliation, to make sure that one's relationships were intact. And so the way that charity was then was they began working on asking questions, interviewing their applicants by trying to find out the answer to this one question, and that is this: who is bound to help in this case? Who is the one that should be helping in here? Or does the person have a family member that would be the best source of help? And so that's the question that they tried to answer, right? And I love this quote. This is from a lady named Mary Richmond of the Baltimore Charity Organization, and she said, "Relief given without reference to friends and neighbors is accompanied by a moral loss." And then she continues on and says, "Poor neighborhoods are doomed to grow poorer and worse off whenever the natural ties of neighborliness are weakened by our well-meant but unintelligent interference." And so that's kind of harsh to an extent, where our intention to help, our desire to help, can sometimes hurt. And that's kind of the point that he's trying to make here. And so affiliation asks that question: who is bound to help in this case? It will not let me, as far as I know, share a screen here on this particular device. So I was going to direct you to this to a blog post that I wrote. It's not actually on a website right now. It's kind of one that we're working on. If I can find it here, it's called I Didn't Know. Let's see if I can get it to bring up here. Yeah. Maybe it'll open up. Basically, see, it's not even opening for me. That's sad. All right, I didn't know. Let me see. Oh, it wants me to log in now. What I do here, I'll have to send it to you. I so apologize for this. Computers are wonderful when they work, and then they're a pain when they don't, right? I'm going to try one more time to see if it lets me look at it. No, it says a no-go on that. So I'm going to try to give you a version of it that I hope you'll understand. So I Didn't Know is the title of it. And it's talking about we all have stories. Every one of us have stories that we tell, that we live each and every day. And the idea behind I Didn't Know says this. It says there was a guy that sat at the corner booth at a local fast food restaurant. He smelled of urine. His clothes were dirty. His hair was unkempt. I could tell that he hadn't showered in quite some time. Nobody sat near that booth. Everybody kind of turned the other way, or if they did look in his direction, it was followed with snickers and whispers and condescending looks of judgment. The writer says, I didn't think anything of it. In fact, I left, but I came back the next day and he was still there. So this time I decided to buy him a breakfast sandwich and a coffee and sit down and ask the story. And begins telling the man that's telling the story, which about his life. He had once worked at an office. He had once had employees under him. He at one time, not at one time, he still did have a college degree. But at one time he had a wife and kids. But then he had a car accident. This car accident caused him to caused him great injury where he couldn't get around anymore. He ended up not being able to work for quite some time. After he'd exhausted all of his sick time and all of his vacation time, he still couldn't make it back in time for the company. And so he lost his job. And he loses his job. Eventually, he can't pay the bills. He loses his car. He can't get to work anymore. Even after he tried to find work and was invited to a new place, he couldn't get there. He was relying on the public transportation system, which was in a town that size was a problem. And so he's really struggling there. Eventually his wife leaves because he can't take care of her, and she's not going to take care of him. And so he finds himself without a home, without a family, without a job, feeling kind of hopeless. And the theme of I Didn't Know comes in and says, I didn't know that this was a guy just like me. I didn't know that this man was college educated. I didn't know that he once had a family that loved him, that he loved. I didn't know that he once had employees that worked for him. I didn't know that I was just one automobile accident away from losing everything. I didn't know. So that's part one of I Didn't Know. And then it goes on talking about, now I've got this renewed passion for people, this renewed compassion, because I remember that conversation. So now I see the guy and he's holding up the sign and it says, anything helps. And I remember that conversation with that gentleman in that corner booth. And so I pull up to this guy and I give him $5. And I said, with a big smile on my face. And I go, Jesus loves you. God bless you. Here's some money. Go get you some food. I see him a couple of days later holding up the same sign. And I give him a couple of more dollars. And this time I have a card with an address of a place that's just a block away. At church up the corner, right at the corner, the big church, they give food every day at lunchtime. You can go there and make sure you always have some food. He takes the card, says he's going to go. I didn't know that the 3 cars in front of me also gave him that same card. I go by again a couple of days later and he's in the same spot and he's holding up the same sign. And this time I decided to ask some questions. I didn't know that he already knew about that place. I didn't know that he knew about all the other places in town. I didn't know. I didn't know that he knew about the mission until he told me that they didn't like him, that they had a lot of rules and that he missed up on one rule. And so they kicked him out and he's not welcome back there ever again. That was a story he gave and I didn't know. So I paid for his hotel room that night because it was raining. I didn't know that somebody else had already paid for the same hotel room. I didn't know. And this message just kind of keeps going on to where I didn't know that he had a family and actually loved him and wanted him to come back. I didn't know that my giving him all of that money and all of those resources was actually stopping him from doing what he needed to do. I didn't know that I was enabling him. And then it ends by saying, I haven't seen him for a couple of weeks. I thought maybe he'd been on the other side of town. I thought maybe he finally got a place of his own. Maybe he got a job and he's working. But an officer informs me that he overdosed. And I didn't know that my giving, which made me feel so good about myself, was part of the reason. Because I enabled him. And now he's fighting for his life and addiction's taken over. I didn't know. Right, so that's kind of the gist of it. I wish I could read it to you because it's written a little different than that. But I wanted to share that because our conversations get a little harder. Maybe you've noticed that the last couple of weeks. They've gotten a little bit more difficult to where just, we'll give the guy the money and who cares what he does with it conversation gets a little more complicated. Because I found myself saying that, just give the guy the money and or the lady the money and whatever she does with it, that's on her, not you. But is that true? Or am I contributing to a family not having their father or their mother or their sister or their brother or their son or their daughter with them? Am I contributing to that? And so now we've got to ask the tough questions. Now we've got to really get to the nitty gritty of how do I really help this person? So the goal of charity originally, at least in the US, was to answer this question: who is best equipped, or who would be the best person to meet this need? And it should start with our affiliations, with our family members, with our closest friends. Now, look, there are bridges that are burned. I get that. But that's where we start. So learn to ask questions. Learning to ask questions is vitally important. The key to building any relationship is to ask questions, right? How do you get to know anybody? You ask them questions. They give you information based on the questions that you ask. Where are you from? What's your name? What do you like to do? These are all ways that we get to know each other, right? We did that the first couple of weeks of this class. We got to know, where are you from? You know, what do you do? What do you hope to get from this class? That getting to know each other is the key. Relationships are key. Because if we don't have relationships, we can't make it. And so whenever we're talking about the disenfranchised and the marginalized, or we're dealing with those that are in poverty, we've got to ask that same question. We've got to ask the questions to get to know the person. Right? Sitting in that corner booth, the man got to know the other man's story. You know, and I've found in my own dealings that if people think that you're actually interested, they're willing to tell you their story. If they think that you're just there to make yourself feel good, then they're going to tell you a story that's not necessarily true. But if they can see that you're there for the reason that you actually want to know, most of the time, that person is going to tell you the information that you need to know to best help. So what did that, I had this as a question for us. What did the storyteller learn in the example of I didn't know? Now we didn't get to read it, and so I might have butchered it as I'm telling it to you. But what did that storyteller get to know? He understood that the man had a family at one time. He understood that this man had employees that worked for him, that he was educated, and that an automobile accident started something in his life, and he didn't know how to control. And oftentimes, whenever we're dealing with people, with the homeless in particular, we're dealing with people that have similar circumstances. They go through something tragic, and then they begin to push people away. Someone wants to help, but now you're embarrassed, right? So this man, perhaps his wife asked all the questions and wanted to help. Well, maybe I can get a second job, or maybe I can start working, just to make ends meet. And then he starts pushing her away. No, we're not going to do that. Oftentimes when we push our affiliations away, it causes controversy. It causes undue hardship on us. So how can we work to restore affiliations, or at the very least, provide a way for us to bond with this person? We've got to ask those tough questions. Five, Robert Lupton, in his book, Toxic Charity, it'll probably be backwards to you now, but this is Toxic Charity. And it's written by a man named Robert Lupton. The subtitle is How Churches and Charities Hurt Those That They Try to Help. In here, he talks about 5 steps to dependency, which I think are interesting, and I'd love to get your opinion on them. And these are those 5 steps. So whenever we give something one time to someone, they feel appreciation. Or if we're the receiver, we feel appreciation. When you give a second time, there's this anticipation, right? So I met you once, I meet this guy once, and I give him $5 to go buy lunch. The second time I go through it, I'm like, hey, it's me again, let me give you. And he's like, oh, that's that guy. That's the one that gave me the $5. There's this anticipation. When I give the third time, it becomes an expectation. The fourth time of giving becomes an entitlement. And the fifth time becomes a dependency. So if you've fallen on hard times, and meaning an organization, has paid your rent that month, you feel very appreciative. You're humbled. You feel very appreciative. You still don't get out of the circumstance. So the second time, there's this anticipation. Will they pay? I don't know. They've already paid once. Will they do it again? And then we, the organization, pay it again. The third time creates this expectation. Fourth time, entitlement. Hey, you didn't pay my rent this time. And the fifth time, dependency. Do you see how that can be dangerous? Or how that can happen? Yeah, go ahead, Emmanuel. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. It can do. And it's good to see that from a perspective of what's going on when we try to be charitable, when we think we're helping people, but actually we're actually hindering them. So yeah, it's difficult. It's what do you do?
It is.
I mean, that book about toxic charity, what's it about in a summary? Is just about
toxic charity. It looks at it asks the question, is what I know as charity, is my giving, or is this charitable organization, is my church, whatever we would describe as charity or as giving, is it actually helping someone or is it hurting them? There's a case studies that he does in here where a lot we love in the I'm not sure how it is in other places, but we in the States, we love to go on mission trips, right? We want to take our church members, our youth, whatever it is, we want them to experience mission trips. And that's beautiful, and we should do that. Oftentimes, did you know that there is a multi-million-dollar mission industry? There are organizations that specialize in bringing in mission trips. He gives an example of an orphanage in Mexico that had the same walls painted 7 times during the summer. And so in between groups, he would have the kids come and basically destroy the wall to make it look like it was dirty and run down and in need, because they had to have something for these groups to do, because the groups brought with them money, right? And so they would come and they would paint the walls, or they would do a VBS or something like that, and then they would leave money to help. And so they became so dependent upon that money. He talks about this particular orphanage would oftentimes get $30,000 every summer from the groups that came. But then the question was asked, what if here in your city, we invested in allowing somebody to set up businesses with this $30,000? How would that better your city? And so he talks to charity, and it's a very easy read if you ever want to read it. It's real simple read, because he breaks it. Every chapter is even broken down in just a couple of paragraphs, so you can get through it really quick. But it asks that question: are we helping? Are we hurting? We've there's also a case study. There's a man, what's his name? He is, I can't recall his name. I got it written down here. Let me see if I can find it in my notes. But he is basically the Bill Gates, if you will, of Africa. He's a software developer. And what he says is that the continent of Africa is is now dependent completely upon aid, so that the people of Africa, the economy isn't growing, it gets worse every year because more and more aid pulls in, and they're relying on aid rather than local resources and setting up enterprises. And so it's interesting whenever you're looking at it, because you're like, well, aid is needed, right? But there can be, if we're not careful, well-intentioned. All of these are well-intentioned. Nobody's out to deliberately, I don't know that any of these organizations are out to deliberately deceive anyone. However, not all are helping, right? So our charity oftentimes doesn't help, it hurts. And that's hard to take in. That's difficult to deal with, because we want to help. We so desperately, it's within our DNA to want to help others, especially if we're followers of Christ, right? Because what did he do? I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was naked and you gave me clothes. I was in prison and you visited me. So we have this nature in us that wants to serve, because we see Jesus in people. We hear those words saying, how you treat people matters. And it does matter. But we looked at last week with Jesus telling the story of the Good Samaritan. What do we say? The Samaritan did what he's supposed to do. He provided relief, bandaged the wounds, he helped the guy up. He provided rehabilitation. He took him to the inn and he paid for it. And then he hints at development. I know they didn't have, those words, those phrases or ideologies back then, but he hints at development because he says, I'll be back. So there's this relationship that was formed along the way. So it's one thing for me to see somebody holding up a sign that's hungry and to hand them some money. It's another thing to say, hey, let's go inside and let's grab a burger, or let's go inside and get something to eat or drink. Let me buy you a cup of coffee. Or it's even different to say, get in my car and let me drive you to a place that can help you. Because then you're getting to know somebody, right? You're getting to hear the story. And so that's the important part. The toxic charity aspect is when we don't see where our resources are truly going, where we don't see the hurt that we're causing people. So anybody have any questions so far? I don't want to rush on. So there's a few.
Yes, quickly, I just want to say,
oh, go ahead.
So what do we do? What's the solutions rather than just give? Are you going to come back to that later?
Yeah, we will. And so what I would say as far as immediate solution, a person listens better when their belly's full, right? And so if a person, and this is just an example. So a person says they're hungry, you can look at them, it's obvious that maybe they haven't eaten. Nothing wrong in giving them some food. What makes it toxic is when that's all we do. And so these cornerstones, there are cornerstones, I think, for a firm foundation of giving. And so the first one is dignity, right? You'll probably hear that from me a lot. Dignity, because whenever we equate compassion with handouts, those might take care of a temporary need, but they lose the opportunity to show dignity of helping somebody find their own solution. So when somebody comes into where I work, the Gospel Rescue Mission, and they come in and they say, hey, I need a different shirt. Sometimes we want to get get a feel for the, now, I mean, if they don't have a shirt on, we'll give them a shirt. Sometimes they get a little more specific. Hey, I want a shirt with a collar. And then it's time to ask some questions. Not because that's wrong, but I also want to get a feel of, we'll talk about this exchange. So on the A, B, C, D, and E, F, G that we talked about, affiliation, whenever you get to the E, that's employment or exchange, right? So, man, we would love to give you a fresh set of clothes. While we go and get the clothing room ready, do you mind taking out the trash real quick for us? Because that tells me if this person is just looking only for a handout, or if there's some room there where they're hungry for something. They want to see growth, that exchange. So that's important. So dignity is a big deal. Helping with money or a quick job search or shelter for a night or food can often end in failure for that person, meaning I'm just taking care of everything. There's a difference between doing for or doing to and doing with. And so that's the difference. I want to do something with somebody so that they can learn to do it for themselves. It's kind of like the old adage of training. You know, sometimes they say, watch me, then we'll do this together, then I watch you, and then you do it on your own, kind of a thing. And so when we treat people as though they're helpless, they usually end up feeling and believing they're helpless. And so understanding that our responsibility might be to let this person be shown dignity. There's a case study. It's actually in Toxic Charity as well. He talks about moving into a very poor urban neighborhood in Atlanta, and because that was a commitment that he made. He's like, I don't want to be at a distance. Talking about charity with tongs. You know what tongs, where you're flipping your burgers and you're keeping your distance because you don't want to get your hands dirty. You don't want to get your hands in the fire, that kind of thing. We do that with charity sometimes. We give at a distance, and we lean way back instead of leaning in and learning the story. And he wanted to be a part of really making a change in his community. And so he talks about his first Christmas there in this neighborhood in Atlanta. One thing they always did was they would always give toys to families in need. And he was so excited because he's sitting in this person's living room, and he's going to actually be there as they're getting their toys. He's not the one delivering them, he's just in there. I might have told this story last time, seems familiar. But whenever they knock on the door and their hands are filled with toys, the man of the house leaves. And the kids go, "Where's Dad?" And Mom has to make up something. Well, he went to go get some milk so that we could have cookies and milk later. He really left because he lost his dignity in that moment. He wasn't able to provide for his kids. And so a charitable way to do this might be, we've done this in a church that I worked at. We have what was called the Christmas store, right? So people will donate gifts still, but we charge for those gifts. But if they got a $20 gift, we charge a quarter on the dollar. They don't have any money, and then they can come in and they can do some work, like an exchange. So you come in and you volunteer for a certain amount of hours, and that gives you so much money to spend in the Christmas store. So they still got to shop for the gift. They still worked to provide for their child's Christmas presents. And so that's kind of the difference. If we have this sense of restoring dignity, our charity is going to be much more effective. So we got dignity. The next one is loyalty. Loyalty, I believe, is a close cousin, if you will, to dignity and respect. It provides an opportunity for mentoring. All right. The problem with a lot of the mission trips is people come in and they spend a week and then they get out. And maybe they'll come back next year, maybe they won't. But there's not really necessarily any loyalty there. And people can see through it. And so at the mission where I work, my guests, we call them guests, the folks that are staying there and are part of our program. Our guests know the difference between those that are coming in because they have a genuine concern and they want to learn about how to best help, or those that are coming out of just kind of to appease a little bit of guilt that they have. They know the difference. And we're helping them with their social issues to still be polite, but they know the difference. So loyalty will provide an opportunity for mentoring. Loyalty is where you're setting up an agreement. Loyalty teaches us that more than one person suffers when a relationship gets ignored. So it's not just, hey, I'm going to break this agreement. It's no big deal. It affects everybody, right? It's kind of like if I break down on the side of the road and I have a flat tire, have a blowout on the road, who does that affect? It's not just me, right? So if I had a blowout and the debris of the tires on the road, it's affecting all those that are driving on that road. Even if they don't stop to help, which very few ever do anymore, they go on the other side, they get in the other lane. So that slows down traffic. You got the people that are turning their heads to look. That's it affects a lot of people. If I have a spare, or if I don't, and I have to go to a shop and buy a tire, eventually I'm going to have to anyway. It affects a lot of people. A lot of people are involved in just something so simple. And so loyalty acknowledges that it's not just me. It's not just about me. What I do affects others. So we got dignity, we got loyalty, and the next one is forgiveness. Forgiveness is helping people see how they've been hurt and how they have possibly hurt others. In recovery, we call this making amends. So, and oftentimes what that entails is I'm acknowledging, man, some of my decisions, these breaking off of my affiliations, yeah, they hurt me in the long run, but they hurt you too. The example of the man sitting in the fast food restaurant, his affiliations were broken. He was married, now he's not. He was an employer and an employee. Now those that worked for him no longer work for him. So everything that he did, and look, some of it's not, the accident may or may not have been his fault, right? Another person could be completely at fault, might have completely blindsided. He might have been sitting in a car by himself in a parked car and somebody hit him. But he still made decisions and choices to push some affiliations away. Now, there were some systems that were probably stacked against him. But whenever we push our affiliations away, we damage relationships. And we actually end up damaging society. And so that's why it's so important that we learn about forgiveness, that we learn to acknowledge, man, I've been hurt. And so I forgive you for the hurt you caused to me. And I forgive myself for the hurt that I'm causing you. It's kind of both ways. So those are three that I think are big. And then the next one is hope. Hope creates the possibility of change. Hope is what everybody wants. That's what gets us up in the morning. It's hope. Yesterday here in my hometown, a tragic event took place. On one of the, we have a turnpike that goes through our city, and so, you know, one goes over and then the next road goes under, and a man hung himself. So everybody that was passing on their way to a factory in town saw this man hanging there. The police stopped, and we're looking up, and everybody's driving, and they're all looking up, and everybody sees this man who took his own life because he felt hopeless. But it didn't just affect him. I don't know the guy. I don't know if he had a family, but it affected everybody driving there that saw that. It affected those first responders. It affected the city. It has an effect on everyone. So when we cut off relationships, it hurts everyone. Relationships are so vital. And so as we're helping those that are marginalized, the disenfranchised, all whatever term we want to give, those impoverished, the outsider, the widow, the orphan, the poor, the Ninevite, whatever we push them away, we are doing damage, not just to ourselves and not just to them, but to our society. So what stood out for you today? Or what's left you with more questions? Either one. Anything?
I guess for me, it would be an alternative way to help people rather than thinking we're helping, but we're actually hindering them. So this needs to be something that needs to be carefully thought about.
Yeah.
If we really want to help people, and the best way to do it, not just give, like you said, like with a distance,
Yeah,
like, without getting our hands dirty. So
definitely.
yeah.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
You know, I had a thought too, made me think about when you first mentioned that maybe our charity might be interfering in the community, you know, and your example of the father who goes to the supermarket because people are bringing gifts to his kids, you know.
Yeah.
But it also made me think, I guess, of maybe we can call it the widow program that they started in Acts, the early church. And looks like it was a program that not only at this particular church, but it was carried on into another church that Timothy was kind of overseeing. And we're seeing, I think Paul might have been realizing that with the younger widows who had family who could support them, they should be taken off so that the family could actually take care of this widow, you know. So it could have, he may have noticed, you know, this is, I'm not saying it's certain, but he may have noticed that the charity that they were giving to this widow might have been interfering in that relationship, right? Of this family taking care of the widow. This concept seems to be built in. It makes me think of the subject of Corban. You know, I think the religious leaders created a Corban so that people who wanted to keep their money instead of giving it to their parents could kind of keep it in a way, you know. But it seems to be part of the law that the kids take care of their mom and dad, you know. So that concept seems to be there. And if you take that away, maybe kind of destroys the relationship in a way, that's what it made me think of.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So if we just look at it and just like, take care of the widows, and we take just the literal definition of it, that could encompass a lot of people, right? But it seemed there might have been, and I think you even wrote this in one of your essays. There was that extent where there was a possibility where it could have been abused, right? Because there was other people that could take care of. So then he put a stipulation. Here's what a widow is. It's not just somebody that lost their husband, but now he's putting an age restriction on it. If they're above this age, then they've lost their husband, and they're considered a widow that we should look after. He's not saying don't look after their spiritual needs, but rather don't use the resources of the congregation of the church to pour into this person that has this capability to take care of themselves. One of the things, I should have found the quote, but it's in this book, Toxic Charity, but it talks about when we do for someone what they have the capacity to do for themselves, we disempower them. And so if you think of it in terms of like almost like parenting, right? When my kids were first born, I cared for them in a completely different way than I do now, right? Because they're completely helpless. They can't feed themselves. They can't get anywhere. They can't even lift their head. And so we take care of them a specific way. We hold them. We make sure they're not going to get hurt. We feed that child. We do everything for it. And then as a child begins to grow and develop, then our parenting changes, right? So now I'm going to make your food, or I'm going to present you your food, but eventually you're going to start to feed yourself. And then as they get a little older, then we might say, okay, your turn to do the dishes. Your turn to cook the meal. And because then we get to this point where we have to release them and let them go. And hopefully we've done enough development in them that they're able to thrive, not just survive, but thrive. And so whenever we're doing for someone what they have the capability to do for themselves, we're actually going the opposite of that. We're saying, I know you can feed yourself, but let me do it for you. I know you can drive yourself, but let me drive you. I know you have the ability to do all of these things, but I want to take it from you. And next week, probably next week, those 5 levels of dependency, hopefully by computer will work. I'm going to figure out what's wrong with it. But those 5 levels of dependency, we're actually going to look at the opposite side of it and see what the giver gets out of this. So we saw what the receiver gets. The receiver gets dependency. The giver is going to receive paternalism or control, right? And we won't even know it. And so we'll look at that probably next week. If not next week, then the following, because it's important, right? We will have hopefully some more scripture next week. But I wanted to introduce this and understand. I understand it's kind of probably a little tough to hear. And so my intent is not to discourage us from the mission of giving, but rather to encourage us to think of how we can give even better, of how we can serve better, of how we can better show someone. What did Jesus say? He said, go and make disciples and teach them. And so as part of that discipleship process, we should be instructing and teaching Yeah, Jesus took care of some physical needs. But if you notice, that wasn't what he was about. His focus was development. He wanted to develop his disciples, develop the people that he came in contact with, to move them into a deeper level that they can now go and share what they've learned from him with everyone else. And he did a great job, because how big is the church now? Innumerable. I mean, from its beginnings in Acts to where we are now, how many thousands or millions or billions of Christians have there been? And so he did a great job at it. And we want to do the same. We want to be about developing people, looking of understanding they're created, everyone's created in the image. You are an image bearer of God, right? However you look, wherever you're from, I can see Christ in you. If I look in the least of these, he says, right? Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. So if I just gave you the food and the drink, but I didn't seek to know you, then did I do service? Did I do service to Jesus? If we're going to take that, if we want to take that illustration, because that's the one people often use, take it and really think about it. Compare that with Jesus and how he dealt with people. Or compare that with the widow's mite, right? If I come and I feed you because you're hungry, and I give you drink because you're thirsty, but I didn't take any time to really get to know you and try to develop a relationship with you, and to help you see Jesus better, then did I really help you? And so, or am I like the people that are giving out of their wealth and dropping the money into the plate? I'd rather be closer to that widow who gives nothing but gives everything, and says, "This is what I have, and I'm going to give it to you, Lord." And I want others to have that. I want others to experience that. Some of the people that I know that are considered homeless are some of the most giving people that I know. But then there's also some that are the most taking people that I know. So I found that people are just people. We, regardless of where we're from or what language we speak, we all have the same basic human needs, the same emotional needs and mental and spiritual needs. And so isn't it great that we can come together and talk about how we can serve others more effectively? And that's what I hope that we can get from this class moving forward. We've kind of established God's heart for the disenfranchised, God's heart for the marginalized. And now let's start to get into how do we apply that today. All right. Anyone else? Others are being very quiet.
Yeah, I just had I guess a thought and a comment on it. You know, I think that's an area that we really need wisdom and knowledge in, and it's still an area where I'm trying to be able to discern with people, because they do tend to come at me with, "Hey, you know, we know you come from the States. You know, can you help us out with something?" And it seems to be left and right here in the Philippines. You know, and I started off, you know, okay, yeah. You know, I should give because I'm more fortunate and they're not as fortunate as I am. But I did come to see that, okay, maybe this is hurting them a little bit, you know. And so I'm looking for answers too. I do believe that overall is helping them with the development and teaching them, you know, like Jesus did, you know.
Yes.
But I'm not exactly sure how to go about, you know, so just looking for answers on how to deal with people, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, and it always feels very awkward. Whatever, you're like, I'm not going to do that, and it hurts your heart, your own heart, right? Because you're seeing that person react like you're supposed to. But our intent should be to grow you closer to God and His intention for you. He created us to work the earth, to tend the garden, right? And the fall made it harder and more difficult. He's like, now it's going to produce thorns and weeds, and you're going to have to wade through all of that. So you're going to toil a little more. But his intention from all along was for us to work and to be dependent upon him, because he's the one that provides the rain and the sunshine and the animals and all of these things, all that we need. The source comes from him. But we don't want to make it depend. My dependency is upon an American, or my dependency is upon someone from a more developed country. And so we don't want to create that, or or here in the States, my dependency is upon suburbanites that are going to come into the inner cities and address everything, right? The best is whenever communities that have historically been considered impoverished come together and solve their own problems and work together. And maybe a person from the outside could come in and say, here's some things to consider, but I'm not going to do it for you. I'll do it with you. I'll walk alongside you, but you've got to come up with it, because that's kind of the gospel story, right? Jesus says, go into all the world, ethnos, go into all different nations. And doesn't that seem strange that he's sending, Jewish men to go into all the nations? They're not even liked outside of their own people group. Nobody likes them. And yet they go and they turn the world upside down. Uses Paul, who persecuted Christians, to get out, and who was an excellent Jew all of his life, to know, okay, you're a missionary to the Gentiles. And he establishes churches, but what does he do? He establishes the churches and he moves on, and he says, it's your turn to shine. And so, and that's what we hope to become. Who better to lead than the person who's right there in the community, right? God can use all of us anywhere, but who better to lead? I'm in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Who better to come in than somebody who's lived here and who went to school here, rather than somebody that says, hey, I'm from New York and let me come into Oklahoma, because what do? We don't necessarily take kindly to that. We always say, the flights are ready when you are. That's how we respond. Why? Because our cultures are completely different. And so it's the same with each of us. Whenever we come in and we start giving, and we're just giving aimlessly, or without really thinking about what we're giving, we're creating a dependency. And that's dangerous. So we don't want to do that.
One thing I might add too is that this could be also an area with people who are not really sincere, or even on the extreme side, they're liars and cheaters. This could be an area that they take advantage of, because I guess you guys, being Americans, we tend to be very generous sometimes when we get into the mood of giving, So sometimes there are organizations that sprout up to take advantage of this kind of kindness. So yes. Just, we have to really discern people, organizations, things like that,
Yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, especially here in my country.
Oh, yes. Every time there's like, we just had we had a flood that came through in last May. And so there were legit organizations that were bringing about aid, but then there were all these others that just suddenly appeared. And hey, donate to help your fellow citizens, but we don't know where this money's going. There's no accountability or anything. And so, yeah, we it provides opportunity for illegal or unethical at the very least. So yeah, definitely.
Daniel, this is Annette. I have a
Hey,
couple of
Annette.
things. I know
Yeah.
it's late. Apologize for that. Just want to make sure that
Oh,
you
that's all
you
right.
got me down for attendance. The other
Yes.
thing is I was attending a class with Kirk. I think last semester that talked about um reading. I think it was reading the Bible with Western eyes, something like that. Misunderstanding the
Yes.
Bible with Western, something like that. And I
Yes.
and I struggled with that class so much, and I talked with Kirk about it, and he challenged me to hang in there, and this was an opportunity for growth. And this is what I'm feeling in this class
Yes.
today. The
Yeah.
build up to today is like, wow, this is really challenging to receive, right? So I'm looking at it as an opportunity for my own growth, because it sounds kind of hard and harsh, and so I'm gonna hang in there and excited to dig even deeper and just continue to try and understand all these, the concepts. I definitely understand that 5-step dependency. It just looking at that, I'm like, I can see that, I can see it,
Yes.
but weighing it and looking at it through biblical perspectives, I'm trying to reconcile all of that and
Yes.
some kind of way. So very, very, very good concepts that I need to just get a little bit mature in my thinking. So we'll put it that way. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot today.
I understand. Yeah, and it's I'm still not there. I teach it. They always say you teach best that which you struggle with the most.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with the same concept, and it was one, honestly, because I've been working at the mission. I started in 2017, and in 2021 I couldn't do it anymore. I'm like, I can't buy into this. And so I was out. And then I was invited back, and and I still struggle with it, to be honest with you. It's still difficult. It's hard to grasp, and I can see it, and I can see it from a biblical perspective. I can see it for sure from just it makes good sense economically, societally, but I trying to see it and live it is very difficult. And so I just want to
Yeah.
acknowledge that to you as well. All right. You guys, everybody okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good. We're
All
gonna
right.
make it. We're gonna make it. We're hanging in there with you.
That's right. All right. Well, I appreciate you all. I do, and your hearts are evident. It's refreshing to see, um, just the love that you have for people, and so don't get discouraged. All right, conversations are going to get hard. That's why we did all the easy stuff early. That we did all the look at this law that established how God loves people, and we did all that early, because then if I started with this, none of you would be here.
That you know what? That was very wise of you.
Yeah,
Make sure you
so
keep that structure.
yeah, so I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge how hard that is. So um, I appreciate you. Before we go, I would like to pray for us, if that's all right, and then we can be dismissed. Uh, Lord, I acknowledge that what we've talked about tonight is tough. It's difficult to grasp, and we're wrestling with it. So Lord, I just pray that you be with our hearts, that you will always leave us open to you, to your word, to your way, and what you would have us to do. Lord, I thank you for each and every person that's taking this class, and what they mean to you, what they mean to your kingdom, and just the encouragement that they've been to me. God, may the words that are spoken be considered, Lord, and if there's anything that is out of place with your will, let that be revealed. May our hearts be open to you at all times, and for you are the authority on all things, and so we just say thank you, and we just thank you and give you the honor and the praise. Fill our hearts with love and compassion for those that are marginalized, for those that are on the outside looking in, and teach us how best to serve them in a way that brings honor to you and brings dignity to them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. See you guys.
Yeah, for the wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Good night.
Recording in progress.